Now let's add Crocodile Dundee to the list of movies from yesteryear that are being censored for quote unquote modern sensibilities. Now, this news is actually old. It came out January 27th, 2025. When this video goes out, it'll be Friday, February 7th. And I argue, not so much argue, that's a bad term. I think it took a while for this news to come out because the trades like the Hollywood Reporter and Variety and Deadline Hollywood didn't really pick this up at the time, and it's only now making itself known. But anyway, this is actually coming from Film Stories, which is a publication over in the UK. Crocodile Dundee new Encore Cut removes footage from original film. And I do want to stress that this is not the first time that Crocodile Dundee has actually gotten censored. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's dive into this article, and then we'll talk about the other edits that have been made to it, actually fairly recently. A 4K remastered quote-unquote encore cut of Crocodile Dundee is being released this year, 2025, but one or two moments have been edited out. In 2020, the most complained about movie to the British Board of Film Classification here in the UK was the reissue of 1980's Flash Gordon. And here's where I'm going to cut in and say I actually like Flash Gordon with Sam Jones and Max von Sydow as Emperor Ming. If you've never seen that movie, it is like it's what I'm going to say is that it is a big budget B movie, and it's best to just leave it at that. Anyway, back to the article. 91 people wrote to the board protesting a simple note that was added to the start of the picture, letting people know the film contained quote-unquote discriminatory stereotypes. Me cutting back in again, I guarantee you that discriminatory stereotypes was solely going to be laid at the feet of Max von Sydow's portrayal of Emperor Ming. Here we go. Not a frame of footage of the film was touched. It's just 91 people felt advising people of something in the film was worthy of complaint because, God forbid, Max von Sydow as Emperor Ming is probably what they were complaining about. The article continues, I always thought the re-release of Flash Gordon was handled well. I'm not quite sure a planned re-release of Crocodile Dundee is going to go quite the same way. The original movie was released in America in 1986, where it became a genuine sleeper hit and the biggest film of the year. It made an international star of Paul Hogan and spawned a couple of sequels too. Yes, Crocodile Dundee 2 and then Crocodile Dundee 3 is often maligned as a unnecessary sequel. Crocodile Dundee 3 coming out in 2001. I don't even remember what Crocodile Dundee 3 was called, but nobody talks about Crocodile Dundee 3. Much like Smokey and the Bandit 3, no one talks about Smokey and the Bandit 3. Anyway, what's often overlooked, though, is that the cut of the film released outside of Australia was different to the one that originally debuted. Australian moviegoers got a slightly different, longer Crocodile Dundee, and now they're getting a 4K remaster of the film in cinemas in 2025. It's also a recut version of the movie, now known as the Encore Cut of the film. However, rather than just opening up the movie with a warning about material that doesn't look too good through a modern lens, it's being reported that 2.5 minutes has been snipped out of the film. As per Q News, there is opening text, but also material where Mick Crocodile Dundee meets a crossdresser has been edited out. That I actually remember that's the one where he reaches down and realizes that that's a man. Actually, pretty funny. If you watch the movie, it makes sense in the context of the movie. But the author continues. It was never the best of jokes and always a bit jarring. But I do wonder where it leads to start retroactively editing films to fit a modern lens. I'm not in the slightest defending the joke and never liked it. But this is a very difficult road. Production company Rimfire Films issued a statement ahead of the Encore Cut's debut, noting that, quote-unquote, some years ago, Paramount Pictures and other distributors requested the reference to the crossdresser be edited from the original film, as they found it offensive. We agreed with that request, end quote. There's another joke on a similar theme later on in the movie that's said to have been excised, that's basically Mick Dundee groping someone. And the moment that they are referring to is much later in New York, because he does it again and realizes that he's actually talking to a woman that thinks it's a man. If you cut out the scene with the cross-dresser, you have to cut that scene out too, because that joke does not work outside of the context of Crocodile Dundee meeting the cross-dresser in the bar. Here we go. Hogan has signed off on the changes to the film. Inevitably, someone has wheeled out the word woke and asked him about it. Just wait until the Mail and Telegraph get a hold of this story. I shudder. Whoops, scroll down a little too far, but here we go. Hogan's response is that people point out to him that, quote unquote, this guy is a folk hero around the world. He shouldn't be groping people. And I thought, yeah, that's right. He shouldn't be. So take it out. I mean, he did it in all innocence and basically being naive, but it's better without it. End quote. The plan is for Crocodile Dundee, the Encore Cut, to debut on Australian cinemas on the 8th of May 2025, complete with 4K remaster. There's also a documentary about the making of the film with newly rediscovered materials telling the behind-the-scenes story of the movie. No word yet on a British release for the Crocodile Dundee. Also, it should be noted that the original cut is still out there too and isn't being deleted. It'd be interesting if we could see the actual original Australian cut too before it was chopped up for a U.S. audience. See, here's the problem with this that a lot of people are pointing out, is that, okay, the original cut of Crocodile Dundee is still going to exist. However, will the original cut of Crocodile Dundee survive on streaming, or is it only going to be the Encore Cut? Now, I brought up at the beginning that Crocodile Dundee had already been censored earlier this year. Apparently, I think it was over. Was it over in Australia? No, sorry, it was over in England. I'm getting the news article from 7 News, which is an Australian, which is Australian. Viewers furious as Crocodile Dundee gets a woke edit with famous scenes cut from iconic Aussie mega hit. So, here we go. The film was aired at 5:15 p.m. On the UK's Channel 5, a family-friendly time. So, okay, they cut out the cross-dresser. They also cut from the broadcast a scene in which misacted limousine driver Gus about his heritage. And here's actually the big moment that they cut out. The UK version, the version of Crocodile Dundee that aired in the UK on January 1st, 2025 for what they call their holiday is called Boxing Day. Over here in the States, it's New Year's Day, but over in England it's called Boxing Day. They cut out the most famous scene of the fucking movie. Okay, however, perhaps the biggest disappointment was the decision to cut the iconic scene in which a man pulls a knife on Mick and Sue, to which the Aussie responds, "That's not a knife. This is a knife." And it's funny because that line is one of the most misquoted lines in cinema history, because everyone always says, "That's a knife." That's not the line. The line is, "That's not a knife. This is a knife." But again, everyone always says that that's a knife, but still, the most famous scene from Crocodile Dundee, at that point, if you're going to cut out the most famous scene of the movie, why even bother showing Crocodile Dundee? Why not just show a different movie in its place? Imagine if they showed Risky Business, but cut out the scene with Tom Cruise sliding across the floor, lip-syncing to Bob Seger's Old Time Rock and Roll. At that point, it wouldn't even be Risky Business. Or imagine if they showed the Terminator, but they cut the "I'll be back" scene when Schwarzenegger comes to when the Terminator comes to the police station and drives the car through, effectively killing the cop behind the desk. Right? If you're going to cut out arguably what is the most famous scene of that movie, then there's no reason to show that movie. Just show something else. But getting back to my original point about the Encore Cut might be the only cut of Crocodile Dundee available on streaming, that yes, the original cut is still out there and it isn't being deleted, but if the Encore Cut is the only cut that's going to be available on legitimate streaming sites, then it might as well be the only cut of Crocodile Dundee that exists for the vast majority of the audience. And this has happened many, many times before. The most famous example of it was the 20th anniversary release of E.T., where Spielberg went back and digitally removed the shotguns and replaced them with walkie-talkies, which that change was so universally despised at the time that the next release of E.T. brought back the shotguns, and the cut that replaced the shotguns with the walkie-talkies has never been re-released outside of the 20th anniversary re-release of E.T. And even Steven Spielberg himself, a couple years ago, this was this from the Hollywood Reporter, written April 26, 2023. Steven Spielberg regrets censoring E.T. No film should be revised for modern ideals. Let me scroll down to the quote here. Here we go. Quote, "I should have never messed with the archives of my own work, and I don't recommend anyone do that. All our movies are a kind of signpost of where we were when we made them, what the world was like, and what the world was receiving when we got those stories out there. So I really regret having that out there." Here we go. "Nobody should ever attempt to take the chocolate out of Willy Wonka. For me, it is sacrosanct. It's our history. It's our cultural heritage. I do not believe in censorship in that way." End quote. So at least Spielberg kind of walked back his decision to go back and censor E.T., but we've seen this so many times recently in the streaming era. It happened a few years ago with the release of Lilo and Stitch on Disney+. The cut of Lilo and Stitch on Disney Plus at least here in the United States was actually the European version, and that was widely despised at the time. It happened with The French Connection when that released to Disney Plus. There were some scenes altered. Back to the Future 2, Universal actually censored that for the Netflix release. Disney went back and digitally. Sorry, I had a brain fart. Disney went back a few years ago and digitally extended Daryl Hannah's hair in the movie Splash so that it would cover her ass cheeks. Obviously the original Star Wars, Han has always shot first. It doesn't matter how many edits to that have been made. But if you look at the history of all of these edits and alterations, none of them have gone down relatively well, which now leads to the inevitable conclusion that piracy is now a moral obligation. If these production companies are going to go back and retroactively alter their movies through modern lenses, then people are going to seek out these original cuts that they grew up with, and it's not like they have to search like long and hard to maybe find the original cut of Crocodile Dundee or the original cut of Lilo and Stitch or the original cut of The French Connection. You know, that's all that this does, and I want to end it with this: of the industry at this point is cutting off its nose despite its face. You're so concerned about getting brownie points from Twitter and other social medias that you're actually encouraging piracy along the way, and then they want to cry foul that everybody's pirating their shit left and right. Well, when you go back and you're just going to artificially change the movie down the line, a lot of people are then going to get the idea of, maybe I should find a way to get an offline backup copy of the movies that I like in case if a studio ever gets this idea, because there were rumors that Warner Brothers was going to go back and edit The Searchers and not Gone with the Wind. I know there were rumors that there was going to be a censored version of Gone with the Wind, or it was removed from HBO Max. I don't remember which one it was, but after that, like the prices of the secondhand copies of Gone with the Wind on DVD and Blu-ray just shot way the hell up in value. I think if I'm remembering correctly, and someone in the comments will probably point this out because I could be dead wrong, but I'm 95% sure what it was that it was rumor and innuendo that Warner Brothers was going to go back and cut parts out of Gone with the Wind, like heavily censor it. And there also was rumor and innuendo at the time that they were going to do the same with The Searchers, which was a classic John Wayne movie. It ended up never happening, but the prices of those DVDs and Blu-rays of Gone with the Wind and The Searchers shot way the hell up in value because of this alleged censorship that never happened. Well, with Crocodile Dundee, there is actual censorship coming to the 4K release, and there was even further censorship on the UK's Channel 5 broadcast on January 1st, 2025, even going so far as to cut out the most famous scene of the entire movie.